just got married, and I think there's something wrong with my mother-in-law. The week after you get married is supposed to be the best time in your life, right? At least that's what everyone told me. So far, it's been one giant disappointment. And I'm actually starting to get a little freaked out about the situation I've gotten myself in. Some background, I met my now husband, let's call him John, about 6 weeks ago. Don't call me crazy. Love happens. He's a bit older than me, but still handsome, charming, a doctor. Basically all the things I was looking for in a man. We hit it off right away. Started to see each other every night, going out, watching movies, having dinners and drinks, you name it. We were attached at the hip basically from the moment we met. 3 weeks in, he brought me to his favorite restaurant, where he'd gotten us a private reservation on the rooftop patio. After a beautiful dinner, he got down on one knee, professed his love to me, and asked if I would be his wife. At the time, I thought, why wouldn't I marry this guy? He's everything I want, he makes me happy, and he obviously loves me too. So I said yes. Please spare me the judgment. I know, trust me, I know. It was a mistake. But at the time, I was wide-eyed and young and naive, and this man who had everything, the job, the beautiful country house, the vacation homes, had just asked poor little me to be part of his life. Maybe it was shallow, or maybe it was fate. I don't know, I'm a wannabe screenwriter, so the idea of being able to quit my bartending job and focus on my craft was incredibly appealing. We had a small ceremony a few weeks later, just the two of us and some friends. My friends didn't exactly understand, but they were happy for me. I was starting fresh in a new life, and who doesn't want that sometimes, right? I was moving out to his house in the country, where I could work and build our lives together. My best friend's only words to me were, "Be careful, there have been a lot of reports of missing peoples in the forest." But other than that, she supported me, and she adores John. John's been great, honestly. He works a lot, being a doctor, so we had to postpone our honeymoon for a few months until he's able to get some time off. He's been planning this amazing European trip with stops in Paris and London and Rome. It's going to be a dream. Unfortunately, this has meant that I've spent the week after my wedding mostly alone at the house, which is now my house, too. But what I didn't know is that I'm not the only woman who lives here. John's mother, let's call her Colette, also lives in the house. John didn't seem to think this was relevant information until I arrived at the house, my new home, with all my stuff packed in my car, and she was having a glass of red wine on the porch. At first I thought the worst. Maybe he was already cheating on me, or maybe I was the one he was cheating with, the other woman. Colette does not look old for her age. She's obviously had some plastic surgery and regularly has her hair colored that honey blonde with highlights. She definitely has a speak to the manager haircut and dark red lipstick even during the day. Anyway, he rushed out of the house to greet me when I got there, and I froze as he placed his arms around me. "Who is that?" I asked him, trying not to be upset. He actually looked back at the house as though he had to double check, but then he just flashed me one of his trademark charming grins. "That's my mother. I must have mentioned her to you at some point, didn't I?" No, he didn't. I would have remembered that, but I was tired and I didn't want to fight, so I made up some excuse. Maybe I forgot, whatever. He grabbed my suitcase and we walked up to the porch. "Mother, I'd like you to meet my new wife, Jane," John said. The woman looked me over, eyeing me from head to toe, judging me silently. She plastered on a fake smile and stood up, drawing me into a limp hug. "Welcome to the family, dear," she said. The next few days, I began noticing Colette's strange habits. John was gone most of the day for work, as I've probably mentioned, so it was just me and her all day. I would wake up early for a cup of coffee and to sit down with my laptop and make things happen creatively. But I started getting distracted by her. The first thing I noticed was her obsession with hair. And not just my hair, but any hair. she would shuffle around the kitchen while I was making coffee, picking up pieces of hair she found on the floor or in between the fridge and the cupboards and placing them in small Ziploc bags. Later that day, I noticed my hairbrush had been completely stripped. I checked all the garbage, but there was nothing to be found. She was definitely stealing my hair. Then, when we were all having dinner a few days later, I couldn't help but notice her usual deep red lipstick had changed to a glossy light pink. Exactly the same as the one in my makeup bag. The final straw for me was when I was walking by her room and heard her humming Pachelbel's Canon loudly. Her door was propped open, so I snuck up to it and took a peek inside. There she was, outfitted in my wedding dress, wearing my lipstick, with little clumps of hair placed on her dresser. She was just dancing in front of her mirror, humming to herself. She had this dreamy smile on as she twirled around in her room, her eyes closed, lost in a fantasy I don't even want to think about. I basically ran downstairs and tried to get the image out of my mind, but I couldn't. I'm going to talk to John tonight about it, but I'm starting to get nervous. Maybe it's my overactive imagination, but is she trying to be me? Does she want to replace me? This definitely isn't normal, and I don't know what to do. Just how much of a mistake have I made? So, I just got married, and I think there's something wrong with my mother-in-law. When John came home that night, I asked him to come up to the room before dinner so I could ask him a question. I don't think Colette knew I had seen her in my wedding dress and had resumed her afternoon with a glass of wine on the porch looking out at the forest surrounding the house or something. John looked tired, and I felt a little bad about bringing this up to him. It honestly made me feel like one of those housewives from the 60s. Another thing I'll need to fix because I'm definitely not that woman. I need to talk to you about your mother, I began, and he looked at me expectantly. I found her today wearing my wedding dress, my lipstick, and she's been stealing my hair, John, I finally blurted out. He stared at me for a moment, then just let out a colossal sigh. I'll talk to her. I'm sorry about this. She's normally very independent. I honestly wasn't expecting her to stay this long on her visit, he said. I did a bit of a double take. You mean she doesn't live here? We need to get our communication straight if this is going to work between us, I said. See, I'm not a pushover. He explained the scenario. His mother had her own apartment closer to town, but she'd been feeling lonely lately and wanted to spend more time with her son. He said she also loves the house and treats it kind of like a vacation home. I told him I didn't know how I felt about starting our new life together with his mother basically breathing down my spine and stealing my things, and he agreed. He was going to talk to her and ask her to go home as nicely as possible. He mentioned he has a special weekend planned for us, for just us. So that's given me a bit of something to look forward to. But she hasn't left yet. And things are getting worse. For the first few days, we lived separately, only talking to each other when John was around. But now she started getting confrontational. After my morning shower, I went to mine and John's room to find all my lingerie splayed out all over the bed. I was pissed. I marched downstairs and found her in the kitchen peeling potatoes for dinner. What were you doing in our room? I asked. I admit I wasn't really thinking. I was just fuming. Who actually does something like that? She looked at me like she just noticed I existed. It's your job to impress him, dear. You'll have to do better than that. Do you want me to order you something a little more risque? Or you could borrow some of mine if you want, she said. Ugh. My face must have turned bright red or something. I didn't even know what to say. What do you say to your mother-in-law when she offers to lend you her lingerie? I don't think that's entirely appropriate, I managed to spit out. I know my son, and if you want him to keep you around, you'll need to keep everything youthful. Just a word of advice, no need to take it to heart, she replied, then went back to her potatoes as if nothing had happened. I ran upstairs and replaced all my things, angry tears streaming down my face. I needed to get out of here, go see my best friend Charlotte. She would know what to do. We'd sit on a patio and share a bottle like old times and hash it out. But when I picked up my purse and ran out to my car, I realized I didn't have the keys. Where were my keys? I rushed back to the house, and there Colette was standing on the porch, a glass of wine in her hands, giving me the smuggest look ever. Have you lost something, dear? She drawled. Where are my keys? I demanded, but she simply turned away from me and walked back into the house. Oh my God. I turned the place upside down, but I couldn't find my car keys. I knew she'd taken them. I knew she wanted to sabotage me somehow. I went into her room, certain I would find them there. She didn't even seem to mind, didn't even come upstairs to watch me. And that's when I found it. It was a simple object, but enough to shatter my entire life. It was a single picture frame. Colette, in a gorgeous ivory lace wedding gown, standing beside John, in a sharp black tuxedo. The photo looked about 10 years old, maybe? But it was clear it was a wedding photo. Colette and John had been married? I ran to the bathroom and threw up. I was shaking, anxiety and anger threading through me like a dark, sinewy shadow. What did this mean? I was faced with two options. I could hide the photo and wait for John to get home to confront him, or I could confront Colette now. But what if she did something crazy, like attacked me? I hovered over the possibilities for what felt like a decade. And ultimately, I decided to wait. I was sure there had to be an explanation. Maybe she got married and that photo was a weird mother-son thing, or maybe it was photoshopped, or I was driving myself crazy. John didn't come home that night. I paced the upstairs, drinking a bottle of wine while I waited, terrified to go downstairs and see Colette smiling smugly at me. I finally fell asleep, clutching the photo to my chest. When I woke up, it was the middle of the night, and something felt wrong. I opened my eyes to find Colette standing right above me. Her hands clenched together, tears streaming down her face, dragging her mascara all over her cheeks. She was wearing my wedding dress again, but it looked like she'd spilled red wine all over it, staining the lace a deep crimson. She was whispering to herself over and over again, not even aware I was awake. You need to leave, you need to leave, you need to leave, you need to leave. I sat up, trying to figure out how I was going to get away, and she wailed loudly this time, You need to leave! She reached down and grabbed a large ceramic vase and hit me over the head with it. Everything went black. I just woke up an hour ago in my bed. The door's locked from the outside. I looked in the mirror and there's dried blood all around my head and in my hair. I grabbed for my phone just as John came into the room. Hi, sweetheart, how are you feeling? He asked, as though I had an accident rather than been bludgeoned by his psychotic mother. I stood up, getting in his face. Your mother hit me over the head with a vase. How do you think I feel? I snapped. He gave me this strange look, a pitying glance for a wounded dog. Oh, Jane, I know you must have hit your head pretty hard. You fell down the stairs. It was completely an accident. My mother called me right away and I rushed home. But don't worry, you're going to be okay. But you need to rest for a little while. He kissed me on the head and guided me back to the bed. I was dumbfounded. How could he believe her? John, I don't know what that woman told you, but I didn't have an accident. She did it. She hit me. And then he pulled out his phone from his pocket, revealing security camera footage from inside the house. Sure enough, it showed me walking down the stairs alone and slipping on the top step, crashing down the stairwell and landing unconscious at the bottom. I looked up at him and he just smiled. A doctor's smile. "Here, take this. It'll make you feel better," he said, pulling out a small white pill and a glass of water from the nightstand. 1,000 thoughts flashed through my head. If I called the police, he had evidence that I'd simply fallen down the stairs. They would think I'm crazy. How did that video even happen? Was I going insane? After a moment, I took the pill and lay down, letting him pull the covers up to my chin and tucking me into bed. The effects of the medication made my body buzz, and I felt a wave of sleep hovering over me. He kissed me and then locked the door on his way out. I need to call Charlotte and get her to come and save me from this. Just after I sleep. I can't stay awake much longer. This pill is really strong. But I promise I'm going to find a way out. I can't let Colette get away with this. I just got married, and I think there's something wrong with my mother-in-law. I feel like I've been trapped in this room for weeks. I can't honestly tell you what's happening anymore. After I woke up from my medication-induced slumber, I called Charlotte. She's my best friend. She's gotta have my back, right? Apparently that's not the case this time. "Hello," she answered, which was so strange of her. Not at all like how she usually answered the phone when I called, which most of the time was like, "Hey, douchebag." "Charlie, I really need you to come get me. I'm at the house and something really weird is happening. John's stupid mother lives here and she's super creepy. She's been wearing my wedding dress and then she just hit me over the head with a vase. Except John thinks I fell down the stairs. She somehow doctored some security footage to make it look like it happened. I don't understand, but I need you to come get me, please," I begged. I was slurring because my body still hadn't completely woken up. Charlotte inhaled deeply over the phone before responding. "Listen, Jane, John called me. You're sick, really sick. It's best if you stay there for now. John is a doctor. He's taking care of you. Maybe I'll come visit you next week. But I think you should follow John's instructions, okay?" I hung up the phone. How had everybody turned against me? Did Colette do this? How could she have done this? How did she get to Charlotte? My best friend was usually my fiercest protector. Now she just wanted me to just stay in this room and what? Stare at the wallpaper? John came in a little bit later. He told me I had hit my head really hard and needed to rest. He said a bunch of medical terms, but honestly, I didn't really hear them. He even had another doctor Skype in to explain it to me. So, maybe something really is wrong with me. The worst part was, Colette was the one bringing me my meals 3 times a day. I was too weak from the medication to do anything. But every time she walked into the room, I just scowled at her. She's barely feeding me. The last dinner she brought in was a piece of toast with butter. Not even any protein. How am I supposed to have any strength if she's not feeding me? Or maybe that's what she wants. She's even left notes on my bed trays. And they're all the same. "You need to leave. All I want to do is get out so I can search the house and figure out what's going on. I never showed John the photo I found, but Colette must have taken it and hidden it because it's not even in the room anymore. I think she photoshopped it. I think she's obsessed with her son and wants to be his wife. It sickens me. The thing is, I've started hearing voices being stuck here in this bed. At first, it sounded like a young girl crying. I thought I was dreaming, but I pinched myself hard a few times and I could still hear it. A soft, distant wail. There was a pattern to it. Colette would come in to feed me or give me medication, and then she would lock the door, and then I would hear it. Crying, sobbing, begging. It was the sounds of women everywhere calling out for me. I couldn't tell John, could I? Would he have me committed? Maybe if he needed to bring me to the hospital, I could tell someone else what was happening, that I was being held against my will and tortured in this room with this ugly, stupid wallpaper and all these women screaming at me. I never should have gotten married. I never should have come here. John comes into the room, but he doesn't stay. He doesn't sleep in the same bed as me like a husband is supposed to. He just tells me I need to rest and that there's something wrong with me. I'm starting to think he's in on it with Colette. Maybe together they have some sick fantasy where they lure in women and kidnap them and... John's here. Oh, crap. I told him I found the photo, the one of him and Colette getting married. He told me I've suffered a mental breakdown, that I'm not seeing things clearly, that my brain is making things up because of trauma or whatever. Charlotte told me I should trust him because he's a doctor. She's never been wrong about someone. I've been so weak. It's like my body is made of pudding. Between the lack of real food and the pills he's been giving me, I can barely stand on my own anymore. Is this going to be the rest of my life? What about the movies I was going to write? What about all the places I was going to see? I couldn't give up. I needed to get out of here. I started planning my escape. When Colette comes to give me my evening medication, I'm going to wrap the rope I've made from ripping my nightgown and throw it around her neck. I'm not going to kill her, just hold it as tight as I can until she's unconscious. She's usually drunk by this time of night anyway from drinking so much wine. It should be nothing. Then I can get out. John will be asleep, but his car will be here. I can get in his car and make a run for it. It sounds like the perfect plan, right? I practiced it in my head for what felt like hours. I timed everything out. I was going to make it. But then, Colette came into my room, but she looked different. She was dressed in sweatpants and a dark shirt, and she wasn't wearing any makeup. She had no tray of food or water or medication. When I made my feeble attempt to wrap my rope around her neck, she brushed me off easily and shushed me. He isn't who you think he is. You need to listen to me because it's the only way either of us are going to get out of here alive. I slipped a pill in his drink. He's knocked out, but I don't know for how long. You need to come with me so we can escape. He's a monster, and I won't let him do to you what he did to the last one. I stared at her blankly as I processed what she was saying. Could it be another lie? Another delusion? Or was this the truth all along? The women in the wallpaper, the ones who've been crying, have all begun shouting at me. Get out of here! This is your last chance! Leave! And I think I finally understood what Colette was trying to say. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She's been trying to protect me? We're leaving now. I'll update as soon as we're safe and I have more answers. I just got married, and I think there's something wrong with my mother-in-law. Well, I've got some answers, and a lot has happened. I don't even know how to describe it all. Colette and I didn't quite manage to escape. We snuck out the door, her holding me up as my body was so limp and weak, and eventually made it out to John's car. Mine was nowhere to be found. He must have moved it. He probably sold it or dumped it into a lake or something. Maybe he was planning to put my body in it first. Colette started the car and we thought we were home free. I finally let out a sigh of relief. I was going to get out of this nightmare. No more wallpaper, no more wailing women, no more medication. That's when Colette filled me in. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, Jane, and I'm sorry you're going through this. I was once in the same place you are, you know. A smiling young bride with a handsome new husband, excited for where life would take me. So that was the wedding photo. It was real. So you were never John's mother? I asked. She shook her head with a slight chuckle. No. I'm younger than him. He's a lunatic. The only thing we can do is get away. This is the first opportunity I've had to escape, but I knew I had to bring you with me. I couldn't leave you with that, she said. I was slowly putting the pieces together in my mind. So, you were his first wife, but there have been more in between? How could you stand that? How could you just let him pretend you were his mother? I was slurring a little, I knew, but I needed to know, woman to woman. A few tears rolled down her cheeks. This wasn't the plan, you know. We were going to travel the world, have children, do all the things a young couple is supposed to do. But John began staying out late, sometimes coming home as the sun rose covered in dirt. I had no idea what was going on. I thought he was cheating on me, but it was so much worse. When I finally discovered what he'd been doing, well, he threatened my life. He threatened my family's lives. He was disappointed that I couldn't bear children, you see. That's all I was to him, an incubator for his future progeny. And so were the last 3 wives. I stared at her hard, not wanting to believe the truth that was buried in her words. The last 3 wives? Dirt on his hands? The missing women Charlotte had warned me about when I first moved out here? What happened to the last 3 wives, Colette? I stammered, trying to sound stronger than I was. She just shook her head. I don't know. At first, I thought the first wife must be mad. John had her placed on bed rest, and she started wailing about yellow wallpaper. It just kept getting worse, and then she was gone. I assumed to an institution. But then the same thing happened with the next wife and the next, and now you. It couldn't be a coincidence. Women just don't go mad. It took me a while to process that information. The women in the wallpaper. Were they the wives of the past screaming to be let free? Why did you stay here? Why didn't you try to escape? I managed to sputter. Colette grabbed my face with one hand, staring hard into my eyes while still managing the car. You don't understand how dangerous John is, and it's important that you understand how dangerous he is, Jane. He has so much power. And not just here. He has connections out there too. He can ruin your life. Don't you think I've tried to escape? The monster has all but hobbled me to keep me here. His first failure. I realized she hadn't left this property since she and John first got married. It would have been 20 years? She had no idea. Colette, there has been a lot in the news in this area about women going missing in the forest. Did you know what he was doing? Did you allow it all to happen? I was near screaming at this point, and Colette was still driving, headlights beaming into the dark. What power do you think I have? I've been locked away in the attic for years. The food I gave you, that's all I could sneak away without him noticing. That's why we need to do this quickly. I'm speeding up. she replied. Finally, we reached the entrance to the property, but my heart sank when I saw the large stone gateway with wrought iron fencing I thought was so charming was closed. Locked. What do we do now? I whispered as Colette stopped the car. She turned it off, leaving us in the darkness. We need to go on foot. I think one of the fence posts is loose enough for us to slip through. Do you think you're strong enough? She urged. I was so weak, so tired, and we were so far. It would be forever until we found someone to help us, but it was the only choice. Just as we were squeezing through the fence, we were greeted with the sharp rumbling of a motorcycle motor. We began moving faster, desperately trying to get through, but it was too late. John arrived on an old moped, his face twisted and angry. Mother, what are you doing with Jane? She's too sick to be out here, he shouted. His voice had lost the calm, sure-footed nature I'd come to know. He was panicking. I'm not sick at all, you sadist, I yelled back, but Colette smacked my arm. It's over. If you want to live, play the part. We'll find another way, she whispered. Her face was drenched in tears as she dejectedly made her way back to the car, dragging me along. Colette played nice with John as he drove us back to the house in his car. She made some excuses that she was just taking me for a walk to get some fresh air. I was gobsmacked. She was so terrified of him, and the two were so used to playing this game that they fell right back into it. Well, I wasn't having it. I refused to play the part of the docile wife who did her husband's bidding. When we pulled up to the house, John had to drag me out of the car, and when he tried to gently stroke my face, I bit his finger so hard he bled. Now, Jane, that wasn't very nice, he reprimanded, speaking to me as though I were a child. You're a monster! What is wrong with you? I screeched. Colette quietly withered away back into the house, back into her role, and it infuriated me. As far as I was concerned, she was just as guilty as John. John pushed me to the ground, his eyes wide, his hands shaking. Is this how it's going to be? Are you not going to act like a responsible young woman? Because that's what I married, Jane, not this little brat. Will you uphold your promise to me and be the mother to my children? I shook my head. At this point, I figured I was dead no matter which way I went, so I might as well go out fighting. I'll never be what you're looking for, I said. That was enough to set John off, and I had no energy left to fight as he picked me up and hauled me down to the basement, the floor I'd never been to because the door was always locked. I thought it was probably a cellar where they kept beets and jars and other things, but I let out a small scream as I realized what he was really keeping down here. The first thing that hit me was the stench. It nearly made me vomit. It was so strong and vile. It was rot and disease and dirt and crap, and every terrible smell you could think of rolled into one. John didn't seem to notice it as I gagged loudly. He placed me on the cold dirt ground and pulled a cord to flick on the light, and everything around me was illuminated. I was surrounded by bodies. Women's bodies. I couldn't even count how many were there. They were all standing, held up by some sort of apparatus, all in white nightgowns. Just like mine. All with long, dark hair. Just like mine. Except their mouths and nostrils and eyes were sewn up, stitched with delicate care. They were blind and mute, their last screams trapped behind woven lips. These were the wives. These were the women screaming at me from the wallpaper. I realized John had mummified them, kept them here as some sort of shrine to what he had done to them. What is this? I asked, my voice hoarse and croaking. The air was stifling, and I couldn't look anywhere without seeing a woman's face begging me for help I couldn't give. John was busy piling together supplies, some rope, clamps, jars of various fluids, a hairbrush. My body started to panic. He was going to add me to his collection. "John, please," I begged. "You don't have to do this. Just please let me go. I won't tell anyone, I promise." He wasn't even listening to me, just moving about and setting up his station with clinical expertise. The women wailed. With expert precision, John placed me on an old wooden chair and tied me up. I had no energy to struggle, and he knew it. My screams and pleas for help or mercy were barely whispers now. Somewhere inside, I resigned myself to my fate. This was it. Soon, I would be just another wailing woman in the basement, and my cries would torment the next wife. I wondered how he had done everything, how he got away with it. The video of me falling down the stairs could have easily been any of these other women. We all looked so similar. The supplies he could probably get online or take from work. The house was in the middle of nowhere. No one could hear the screams. Would he ever be caught? John stood and looked at me, a horrifying smile pasted on his lips. Pride. He was proud of what he had done, of what he was about to do. He enjoyed watching me struggle and struggle, watching me be too weak to fight back. I couldn't even spit on him. It looked like he was about to say something. Maybe the grand speech that explained it all. How his own mother had abused him and now he hated women, and this was how his mind reconciled it all, whatever. There could be no justification for something like this. But then, just as he opened his mouth to speak, there was a loud bang, and he slowly crumpled to the ground. Behind him stood Colette, a cast iron pan in her hands, breathing heavily as she looked at the body on the ground, blood seeping from the wound on his head. "We are leaving, now," she stated, hurriedly untying me from the chair. The rest of what happened is a bit of a blur. We found a jerry can of gasoline and covered the basement in it, including John's body. And Colette tossed a lit match to the trail as we rushed out of the house. I watched the house burn in the rearview mirror as Colette drove us out, the gate now unlocked and open. We were finally free. I felt like I could hear the wailing women thanking us as they burned with John. They were free too. You're probably wondering why we didn't call the police. We could have easily had them catch John in the act, and of course they would arrest him once they saw all the bodies. Or maybe not, depending on how deep his connections were, according to Colette. You can't trust anybody. That's what I've learned throughout all of this. The truth is, we didn't want John to become an infamous killer in the media, because we all know that's what would have happened. His face would have been featured on every TV, on every news website. People would be talking about his deeds for years, spreading the poison of what he did. He doesn't deserve anything more than what he got. And all the missing women didn't deserve to be canonized as martyrs, known forever for being silenced with a needle and thread. Their voices will be heard. Their stories will be told. But in fiction. As a film, perhaps. Nobody needs to know it was real. Colette and I will go our separate ways once I'm able to take care of myself. We both have a lot of healing to do. She's confided in me a lot of the abuse she's been living with for the last 20 years, and it's going to take a lot of work for her to find her new normal. As for me, I'm going to follow my dreams and keep writing movies. Who knows? Maybe one day you'll be in a theater watching one of my films. And you'll know the truth. That true horror, no matter how big or small, comes from a very real place. The darkness hides in each and every one of us. Thank you for all your advice. Stay safe. Jane.